you and I were talking offline about some of the different traps that teams and engineering orgs run into. And you brought up something that I personally, I'd never heard before or associated or connected with engineering teams. And it made me think that this topic is something that we just likely don't acknowledge enough in engineering leadership. And it's this concept of aspirational mismatch. And so I was wondering if you could kick us off by helping us understand what is aspirational mismatch, this idea of aspirational mismatch, and why is this detrimental to engineering teams or engineering orgs?
Aspirational mismatch is a phrase I've come up with because I really wanted to put a finger on when we make choices, not from a realistic assessment of who we are, but from a vision of who we'd like to be. And we don't resolve that. We don't resolve the difference in appropriateness. And, I have some equipment and materials for cooking bagels in my kitchen. And I bought that thinking I want to be the kind of person who cooks bagels, and I never have. So that's a at-home personal example of an aspirational mismatch.
Well, that last example really resonates with me. As you know, I was telling you earlier, I'm in the final stages of wedding planning, and part of that is like assembling a wedding registry. And I've talked to so many friends that, like, in that process, have made an aspirational choice, like, oh, we're going to become bread makers, and we're going to get this big bread making machine, and then it ends up being something that never gets used. So that example, I totally resonate with. Um, and so when you think about like this within the context of engineering teams, like what are some of the like impacts or detriments like with this aspirational mismatch? Like what's kind of what is the damage that's caused with teams when this happens?
Right, because if it was just some bagel flour in the cupboard, we wouldn't care. But we often make aspirational choices for an entire engineering team or an entire company that turn out to cost a lot more. And these choices often cost more, and not in the acquisition cost. I'm usually not even worried about the acquisition cost, but in the upkeep cost. When a company decides to adopt NoSQL database architecture because NoSQL is really cutting edge, and we would like to be a cutting edge engineering team, but if NoSQL isn't a good match for our database architecture, it's a bad choice, and it costs in extra programming effort and bug finding effort every day, every week.
So I'm less familiar with this term, but I think you've brought this up with me beforehand about the concept of cargo culting. And so, can you talk a little bit about how this is similar to cargo culting or different than cargo culting? Like, how does cargo culting, that concept, sort of fit into this idea of aspirational mismatch?
Cargo culting is a more well-known term for a decision-making flaw or bias, and it comes out of the Pacific Islands in World War II, I guess, where for a while planes would land bringing wonderful things with them during the war, and then after a while the planes stopped landing and the wonderful things stopped being brought and discarded. And so on a couple Pacific Islands, people made cargo runways. They would clear the grass and make the signals and hope that doing the accoutrements of a proper runway would make the cargo planes happen again. A choice can be both aspirational mismatch and cargo culting. Like if you think that you're going to scale to 1 million users because you have a database that can scale to 1 million users, that is cargo culting. You have the cause and effect backward. It's not having technology that will scale to 1 million users that gets you those 1 million users. That's what companies who have already gotten to 1 million users have.